I'm Andy Adams, editor of Canadian Yachting magazine, and with me today is John Gullick, who is the manager of government and special projects for the Canadian Power and Sail Squadrons. Good morning, John.
Good morning.
Did I get the title right?
You sure did.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
This is an important kind of a title to have because there are a lot of legislation, things that have come in the last few years for boaters. Everybody should know about them. They don't, do they?
No, it's amazing. Actually, we've recently done a survey, and coast to coast, and we basically wanted to talk to boaters who were not members of CPS. Okay, we broke them into four categories: those who were experienced boaters, most of them with fairly large craft; those who were the cottage type of boater, so they were a regular everyday boater; the angler and hunter. And then the sort of the wannabe the boater and the paddler. Okay, we found with experienced boaters, so these are people who have boats, they spend a lot of money, they got a lot invested in what they do and what they enjoy. We found, I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 28 some odd percent did not know that to operate a powered vessel they required a pleasure craft operator card.
My God. That's a bit of a shock because that was a program. I'm not saying the government did a brilliant job of introducing it or promoting it or anything else, but that was more than a decade ago, wasn't it?
Introduced in '99. And these are experienced boaters. The next group down, the cottager type boater, it wasn't as much, but it was about 19%. So, and these are people who, it wasn't just that they didn't have the card, that they didn't have their pleasure craft operator card. They didn't know they needed to get it, let alone have it.
Now, so let's be clear. If the guy is out in the boat, doesn't have the card with him,
yes,
and he's at the helm of the boat, has command and control of the vessel, I guess, and he's stopped by the authorities, what happens?
Well, he could be subject to a fine, which is $250 plus costs, so it's in the neighborhood of $325 generally, and that would be pretty typical in the province of Ontario, depending upon the jurisdiction. But that would just be for not having the card. And then, of course, once an officer determines that you're not even into the basic stuff, and they've looked and said, well, okay, where's your PFD? And they have to go rummaging around in the cabin down below to find it, which now under regulation, they've got to have it close at hand when they're underway. They don't have to be wearing them yet. I don't know if that's going to come or not. It certainly would be a good idea, but they've at least got to have it close at hand. So when Officer Jane comes and says, show me your PFD, you should be able to go. And if it's an inflatable PFD, the law requires you to wear it. So now you pick up your inflatable PFD, and Officer Jane says, show me your PFD. Show me your PFD. $250, please. And, so, wow. Once you start to get into the areas where really they don't have a lot of tolerance, drinking and boating, having your PFD close at hand, having your operator competency and education, those kinds of things, they're pretty well, you've got to do it. Your basic safety equipment has to be on board. Those are the kinds of things that they're really going to be looking for under regulation.
So let's just recap for a second, because I'm betting that a lot of people won't realize exactly the implication of what you've just said about having the PFD close at hand. If it is carefully and nicely stowed away, let's say in a storage compartment under a seat or something like that, then
you're in breach of the regulation. The current regulations in Ontario, you're in breach, and you could be fined for not being able to produce that virtually immediately. That's what they're going to be looking for.
So that will come as a bit of a shock to a lot of people.
And once it starts, and then if you start to get a little defensive and so forth, and then okay, where's your okay, you've got an inboard gas tank. Where's your fire extinguisher? Or you've got a propane or gas-fired cooking device, refrigeration, whatever. Where's your appropriate fire extinguisher? Where's your manual propelling device? Where's your bailer? Where's your sound signaling? So once you start looking at that, I was doing a course at an automotive plant in their health and safety, And this young lad comes up to me. He said, you know, I got stopped the other day by an enforcement officer. They wanted to know where my fire extinguisher was. And I've got an outboard motor. And I'm saying, yeah, but you had an inboard gas tank, I'll bet. And he said, well, yeah. And I said, well, okay. So he said, yeah, but like by the time this guy got finished with me, I was almost $1,000 in fines. And so I said, little tongue in cheek, I said, so when did you stop talking to this officer and trying to make a case for yourself? And he said, well, after I got to about $975. And I said, so if you had stopped after you got to the fire extinguisher at the first go around, that's probably as far as it would have gone. Yeah, they would have said, you know, you should do this, but go ahead and do it. If we catch you again, you're in trouble. But as long as you keep, you know, rattling on about, well, I didn't know, or, you know, whatever, it'll stop when you stop. They're not out, you know, enforcement officers are not out to, you know, to make huge money and to make you pay every cent that they need to be. They're out to make sure that you're operating safely and so you can enjoy your boating experience. That's what we're all in this business for. And that's what they're there for as well. So if they can educate, they're going to take every opportunity. But if you don't give them the opportunity, then they're going to regulate.
Well, so this is important news with a really significant potential financial implication.
Absolutely.
So let's talk for just a second about what happens. Let's say that the guy has a boat and, you know, maybe he should know about all of this, but I'm betting a lot of people don't. What does the Power Squadron have, the Canadian Power and Sail Squadrons, in the way of courses, or how do you help somebody really come up to date on all of these regulations so that they know they're not going to get hit and they're a safe boater, they're doing the right thing?
Right. Well, for us at Power Squadron, it starts with our basic boating course, which is called Boating Basics. And essentially it's the course that we teach for people who are looking to get their pleasure craft operator card. There are a minimum of 257, I think it's 257 key learning points that are required coast to coast to coast by Transport Canada, and all of those organizations who teach these courses, they have to have them approved. They have to meet those minimums and they have to provide the right information. So our course does that, and it adds probably about another 150 some odd key learning points that we think are important. And that will give you all of the basic information, the types of equipment, safety equipment that's required by law, what kind of condition it needs to be maintained in, and so on and so forth. And again, depending upon the size and the type of the vessel, because the bigger the vessels get, the more equipment that you would need. If you're operating a personal watercraft, for example, and you're wearing a PFD, there are certain pieces of equipment that you don't have to carry. If you're not wearing a PFD, you've got to carry them. The reality is that when it comes to types of vessels, people who operate personal watercrafts, they are very likely to be wearing a PFD. They're well in excess of 90%, 95 some odd percent, I think, wear rate, coast to coast to coast. And kayakers, I think, are a very close second, 93 or some odd percent. So they're very compliant when it comes to having the right equipment and so forth. But then when you get down to your typical cottage boater, they tend to be in around the 20 some odd percent compliance rate for everything. Even if they've got their pleasure craft operator card and they've taken, you know, a course, or now if you go online to take the course, you have to actually take a course. You can't just go online and challenge an exam anymore. You actually have to spend, I think it's 3 or 4 hours in doing the course. There are minimum number of chapters, 5. At the end of each set of chapters, there are 10 sample questions. You've got to answer the questions. You've got to get sort of 8 out of 10 right. You can move on to the next chapter. When you've done that, you finish your 5 chapters, then you can move ahead to challenge the exam. That's the standard system across the country, regardless of providers, online.
Right. But the Canadian Power and Sail Squadrons is not only one of the biggest pleasure craft operator card providers, but they are a coast-to-coast organization. You can always find a chapter of the Power Squadron. If you had a card and you lost your Power Squadron card, you can get a replacement, am I right?
Yes. Yep. And even if you didn't know, you can contact Transport Canada, and Transport Canada will tell you which organization issued your card. You go back to that organization to get a replacement card. And you can have multiple cards now. So if, for example, like here on my PFD, well, you can't see it, but I've got my card is actually attached to my PFD. And I've also got my restricted operator certificate in here as well for my VHF radio. So that's always with me. And so if I go from vessel to vessel, I take my PFD with me, my card's always with me, and my sound signaling device is always with me because I've got a whistle attached.
Perfect. So you've got a lot of points covered.
Yeah.
I think that's great. So how do people get in touch with the Power Squadron to find out where there's a course in their area and get signed up for this?
Well, the website is www.cps-ecp.ca, ECP for French, and everything we offer in French and English. And also now in and around Toronto, we've been working with the Chinese communities here in Toronto, Markham specifically, and out on the West Coast. And we've actually translated the material for Pleasure Craft Operator Card into Cantonese. And so we're able to provide that training in Cantonese for those people who would like that. And there are some very large Asian communities which that helps a lot. And they helped us create the material.
Well, that's excellent. John, thanks so much for sharing this with us. I hope that people will pay attention. Go to the Power Squadron website. Mr. John Gullick, thank you so much.
Nice to see you.